There's so many wonderful things grabbing our attention, our phones, but also, boy, all the fabulous cool workshops and trips people are taking and all of the fabulous ways that people are connecting with nature in their community. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff going on, but you really have to prioritize these days and kind of elbow out whatever is getting in the way of your lifestyle, really having appropriate nourishment and nutrient density. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Drew Ramsey podcast. It's really a treat to be with you and think about mental fitness and mental health and nutritional psychiatry. You've sent in so many wonderful questions. I really appreciate those. I've got a bunch that came in from Instagram. People have been sending in lots of inquiries, and thank you. So let's get into them right away. This is going to be a really great episode. We're going to talk a lot about mental fitness framework from Healing the Modern Brain. I'm going to talk about nutritional psychiatry. You guys had great nutritional psychiatry questions ranging from how to do this on a budget to what about trigger foods and foods that cause mental health symptoms. And then your questions were really wonderful, including a mom wondering about the effect of a cancer diagnosis on her son's mental health. So I'm getting into all of those over this episode. And as usual, just thank you. I really appreciate your engagement. And it's wonderful to see how many times these episodes get shared with all of the experts we've had. So thanks a lot for the questions. Thanks for subscribing and for sharing. And let's get into them. So first, let's start with some classic, great nutritional psychiatry questions that came in. Here's one that we all have. What is the best way to start incorporating more nutrient-dense foods into a busy lifestyle? Great question, and let's break that down. This is a person who I think knows about nutritional psychiatry because they use this phrase, nutrient density. What's nutrient density? It's a basic principle of eating for mental health and eating for overall health, which is thinking about the foods that we consume in terms of the nutrients they provide, not just the calories. When we calorie count, it really doesn't tell us a lot. As I often say, a can of Coke has 140 calories, or any soda, really, all carbohydrates and all sugars, right? And a kale salad, let's say a few cups of kale, a little bit of olive oil and lemon juice, simple, salt. Also about 140 calories, right? So the kale salad is bringing all kinds of nutrients, phytonutrients, fiber, think about what's in the olive oil, all kinds of good stuff for about the same number of calories. And so that's why we think about kale and other real whole foods as more nutrient dense. They're bringing more of what we need, more vitamins, more minerals, more phytonutrients, more fiber. If you're into the fermented foods, more good bugs. So that's nutrient density. So first, I think the best way is to understand which of those foods you like. I just think about what pops in your head, these are amazing, healthy, nutrient-dense foods that I like. As I've been talking this year and speaking with groups and giving grand rounds, I always joke about how many times I say lentils in a talk. And that's because lentils are a big part of a nutrient-dense food for me and for our household. Just a very simple food, really inexpensive food, easy to make. So many ways to kind of add different flavors and seasonings from around the world. Lentils are in some ways easier to cook from scratch, very much faster to cook from scratch than beans. And so finding those equivalents of lentils for your house, or if you're not a lentil home yet, bring it. Let's do some lentils. There should be a nice list. In the AMEND trial, so in some of the research around food and mental health, there's a great trial in young men with depression, right? Not exactly who we think are going to change their diet, really embrace this idea, right? Yeah, I should eat for my mental health, mental health, food, young men. Well, amazing research by Jessica Bays and her group in Australia. And they were looking at, one, can we intervene with young men and get them to change their diet? And they did that with 2 sessions. And everybody, the participants in the trial talked about kind of feeling seen, feeling helped, and getting some tools that they liked. And the lead researcher, Jessica Bays, told me, it was just 3 things. We had them focus on plants that they liked. So nutrient density, right? Because for plants, we're getting lower calories and more nutrients often. Not in any way that we get lots of cool nutrients from meat and seafood too, but just, plants have that special quality. They're mostly water. And then focusing on olive oil and increasing olive oil consumption. And she noted, a lot of these young men are dipping bread in olive oil. That's fine. Just more olive oil is a way to increasing the Mediterranean dietary pattern score and getting more calories from this healthy olive oil fat. And then what was the third thing Jessica said to me? Oh boy, I see it right there on my slide deck. Hold on. Plants they like. Olive oil, legumes, of course, is about lentils, right? So the idea of more plant-based proteins, more legumes, more hummus, more lentils, more beans. So that's one way to add nutrient density: more plants, more beans. I think another way to add nutrient density to your diet, and again, these are thinking about ways to do it in a busy lifestyle. We'll get to that part in just a second. So coming with your list, thinking about simple plants, keeping it simple. I think that's the one. I see a lot of people are like, oh, I was like this, get overwhelmed. I remember when I used to think about like cooking seafood or cooking fish, be like, oh wow, like it's gonna be like food poisoning. It's gonna be like horrible. And it's like once you get used to whatever it is, cooking things like seafood, it's fine. So I think keeping it simple, which is how I learned to cook seafood, but also with your vegetables and with your kind of ideas of nutrient density. Things that I really like that go in the fridge that are super quick. Let's talk about busy lifestyle. I like kefir. There's also lactose-free kefir, but kefir is a fermented dairy product, and so that's a great way to get good bugs, fermented foods. It's a good source of protein, and really great in a busy lifestyle. I think about nuts as snacks, really nice ways, roasted or unsalted, or I usually say raw nuts. And so thinking about cashews, almonds, walnuts. I'm a fan of meal prep. I think it gets dismissed, and again, we don't keep it simple. But I get inspired. I see a lot of people who make some nice portions of wild salmon and greens and sweet potatoes, and they put it in some containers and they keep it simple. Whether that's lunch at work, and so I think those are all ways that I see people doing this. Meal delivery. I see people using lots of meal delivery services. One of the fun things about being a psychiatrist is, boy, I hear about all of them. And so that's great. You see people's concerns and complaints, which tend to be either not using it, getting bored, or the waste products. But a lot of companies have done a really, really great job with this, whether it's, figuring out how to like recycle ice bags, or whether it's, reducing the amount of stuff that you get. I'm a fan, certainly, of some communities, some cool things I hear about, like people cooking together, or different food banks is another way with people with a busy lifestyle. A lot of times we think about folks in the wellness world. I'm in a community that has an incredible food bank, and so a lot of people are getting some help with their groceries and kind of increasing their nutrient density, getting some fresh produce. A lot of places now have food banks that you can go online, you can kind of make an order. So a lot of emergency responders, firefighters, teachers, folks in all kinds of service industries. Food's gotten really expensive, and so this is another way. If you're busy and you're struggling with your budget, and I got a great budget question later. These are another way to kind of add nutrient density. Is think about your sourcing. I think is the way that your sourcing and your efficiency in terms of like who's preparing your food. If you need to maybe it's like, hey, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I stink. I just don't I get overwhelmed at work. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about me. But I need help, right? I either need to go to have dinner with a friend, or if you're family, like maybe Wednesday night's a night that like it's a family taco night, and it's super simple, super quick, and it rotates. But finding those solutions, if you're busy, of where are you busy, and then what are the smart solutions to get nutrient density, as you're saying. So let's see, nuts as snacks. I'm a big fan of just fruit, like a piece of fruit, because it's satiating, it's easy to carry. I'm a fan of pears. Let me think of some other last tips for you. Sorry, I'm going to move on to the next question, but I feel like somehow I want to give you more. But nutrient density in a busy lifestyle. Oh, sorry, the most important part of that, right? If you're complaining about busy lifestyle, what's going on with your lifestyle? So busy is like and too busy. Those are very close these days, overscheduled. I don't hear that a lot of people are just, getting to settle and sit and savor and enjoy things. And so I think also if the heart of your nutrient density and not kind of caring and nourishing the self is a problem, and it's a big part of healing the modern brain, this framework of really trying to elevate and identify the things that are so supportive of our mental health, things like our connections, things like valuing, having a little bit more time. I'm from Indiana, right? In Indiana, we're renowned for our basketball skills, and I played a lot of basketball when I was younger. And I was always really great at boxing out. This is when like someone shoots and you get your elbows up and you get down low and you make sure that you get that rebound. And I think that's a really important skill these days. There's so many wonderful things grabbing our attention, our phones, but also, boy, all the fabulous cool workshops and trips people are taking, and all of the fabulous ways that people are connecting with nature in their community. I mean, there's all kinds of cool stuff going on. But you really have to prioritize these days and kind of elbow out whatever is getting in the way of your lifestyle, really having appropriate nourishment and nutrient density. It's my inspiring last thought on that one. Let's get to the next question. All right. Let's see. So, mental health and diet question. Can certain foods trigger mental health symptoms, and how can we avoid them? Yes, 100% what we eat can influence how we're feeling. This is also a piece that gets really overplayed often by influencers and people who aren't particularly evidence-based. There's a lot of controversy around things like food sensitivities. There are also a lot of people who really struggle with food sensitivities and food allergies. So this is a very controversial topic, but I want to say for sure, yes. A simple example are energy drinks. I see this a lot. This has actually made the rounds on social recently. People who are taking a prescription stimulant, methamphetamine related compound like an Adderall or a Vyvanse or a Concerta, and are also then taking, the lots of brands of these that are making very, very stimulating compounds. And they have a particular mix of things. Right? They have lots of caffeine, just straight up, from the lab caffeine, but they also have related phytonutrients, things like theobromines, which we, for example, find in chocolate, but you also find them in lots of other plants, stimulating compounds that mimic or are like caffeine. And so you're getting these mega doses of stimulants, you get increased blood pressure, increased heart rate. So right now, everybody who's listening, just take a breath and imagine this, right? Your heart is pounding. You're probably stressed out because you had a big energy drink. You're on stimulants, so there's already a little bit of an increased kind of vigilance tone. This is really where, of course, what you just ate is really triggering increased anxiety, disrupting the appropriate treatment if you're using these medications appropriately of something like an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder or a major depressive disorder, the two main places we see those medications used. And so this is an example. I guess this is an example of where there are food medication interactions, but it's also an example of a new modern food that just really derails a lot of people. And so that's a great example. It's sort of one of the things in the framework I think around with mental health and healing the modern brain is what's happened in the modern world, right? Healing the modern brain is kind of this premise that our modern brain is up against some new stuff. There's this the stuff we've always struggled with as humans, but then there's the new stuff, and so this is these new foods are part of it. All right, so energy drinks is one that can. I'm going to say ultra processed foods, but I want to say why. I'm going to say no fiber. Right. So right now we're not feeding the microbiome, kind of part of, I would say part of the new science of eating, right? It's super simple, and who knows how big of an impact it makes, but I think everybody agrees it makes some impact. More fiber and more fermented foods, and adding those in a gradual but consistent way if you don't have them. And so that's kind of why are ultra processed foods so bad? And so part of it is, stuff people focus on, right? All the nastiness in there, the preservatives and the food dyes and all that. Yeah. But then there's also stuff that's missing, like the opportunity cost of sucking up all your caloric kind of capacity with stuff that's not giving you the nutrients that you need. And one of those nutrients that does not get included in the list enough for people is fiber. And so that's certainly, when I think about triggering mental health symptoms, right? Not having an appropriately nourished system, and that includes fiber and fermented foods in my book, certainly can contribute to mental health symptoms. There's lots of, I think, really interesting cutting edge research and a lot of controversy around that with how much is kind of the question you get a lot, but with the notion, and I think kind of the stance, right, that my microbiome is at the center of immune regulation and digestion. It's a really important part of my overall mental fitness and health. And so eating more plants, eating more foods, fermented foods becomes part of my mantra. All right. So that's other trigger foods. Boy, when we did the antidepressant food scale, which is an open source, really simple paper to calculate nutrient density, we looked at the 12 nutrients at that point in science. I think it was like around 2017. And there were 12, the nutrients that were most related to the prevention or the treatment of mental health concerns, but namely depression is what we really needed to focus on in the literature. And when we looked at that, we only thought about real whole natural foods. And so the move there is to really try and avoid the majority of foods that are kind of quote unquote triggering or contributing to mental health problems. When you look at the data, a diet of ultra processed foods contributes to eating more calories, contributes to weight gain, contributes to certainly consuming a lot of new molecules. And again, lots of debate about how much those are messing up your mental health. Some researchers, for example, have postulated or kind of shown through their research and the data that exists that about 9% of global attention deficit disorder is caused, I'm going to use that word, by food dyes. And that's a statement out there in the real good evidence-based science. There's also probably a way that we make a simple step, right? A little move. That's the one that I recommend people make. Is it's not hard to remove those from your diet. You don't have to worry about the research. It's one of the really nice things, I think, being a parent and really reaching or leaning towards mostly whole foods. Not that we don't ever have fast foods and my kids don't have garbage and junk sometimes, sure, but it's not the basis of the diet. Sorry to get all into this, but triggering mental health symptoms and how we avoid these foods, in some ways is a really like simple dance, which is about just sidestepping ultra processed foods. In our clinical work and with our amazing chef and health coach, Emily Berner, we talk about simple swap, really just like understanding what is the stuff? What's the stuff? Like I'm a big like sweet tooth. And so I make sure my snacks are like nuts and dark chocolate. Because I want it to be really good, nourishing quality. I don't want to feel guilty about my sweet tooth anymore. I'm 50. I'm done with that. So, thinking about the foods in your diet in an empathic and a caring way, flavors you like, things you like, experiences you like, and figuring out how to raise the nutrient density of those and how to consume them in a way that supports your mental health. That's at the heart of nutritional psychiatry. That's at the heart of mental fitness. And that's how I hope you think about triggering mental health symptoms. Not so much as like, oh, it's this mysterious thing out there in your diet that's like, oh, that's why you're having panic disorder, but to understand that diet is one of the factors that you have control over that does play an impact on your overall mental health and on some certain types of symptoms for sure. A good example of this would be somebody like eating and drinking late, stressed out day, big pasta meal, a couple beers, maybe throw back a nightcap, hop into bed trying to get your sleep hygiene. What are you like midnight now? Right, so there's going to be like a disrupted sleep, no matter how good that brain food was, you're eating it way too close to bedtime. Right? This is then the next day really probably not going to be one of the best, most productive, feeling great days. And so, is there a trigger food in there, like food dye? Like that's not exactly how I encourage us to and kind of want you to think about food and mental health. We just know that dietary pattern over time leads to, let's call it more mental health burden. You're not going to feel your best self, more mental health disability. You're not going to have your most creative, most present, most energetic self. So great question though. And I'm happy to think and talk more about food sensitivities and triggers. It's a great subject. All right. Let's keep going. Great questions. As I said, I really appreciated these, especially some of the questions from your lives about real life scenarios you're in, and some of what I've seen in my clinical practice. And I'll get to those in just a moment. Here's one about balance, which is just such a great question, right? How do I recommend balancing physical health, mental health, and work-life responsibilities? All right. First of all, I'm just going to ask you to completely change that framework. If you're separating physical health and your mental health, you are not being I don't want to be mean about this. It's just like, come on. Like, well, this is artificial division that you've created. When you're in the gym lifting, do not just tell me this is your, looking great with your shirt off and flexing. This is about all aspects of mental fitness, about progression. It's about goals, about discipline. So I really encourage people to think about mental health and physical health is really in some ways the same thing. And under this framework, I call mental fitness. And in Healing the Modern Brain, I get really explicit about this, that the way we approach, exercise is actually really, really damaging to lots of people. It's this notion we got to no pain, no gain. We got to go hard. What is the movement that is actually the most powerful for your mental health? Like tonight, if you want to start improving, your mood and insulating yourself against depression, what is the activity that you should do? You should go dancing, according to the data. And so this is where we need to reconceptualize movement and how it applies to mental health, and stop letting the kind of exercise and all the muscle protein junkies dominate the headlines of why moving our bodies is so amazing for our mental fitness and for our mental health. And so part of my recommendation on balance is around stacking and kind of combining these ideas. Lots of people talk about their stack with their supplements, and that's not where I think your mental health comes from. It comes from combining things. I've been working a lot on parenting, as I'm a dad, and thinking a lot about that, how to do that well, and not be like a weird shrink parent. No offense to psychiatrists, but how do you and be thoughtful. Also, I've been really trying to get outside. This is an inside job, so to speak, being a psychiatrist. But you do sit inside a lot, and it's wonderful. Part of it, in some ways, it's like the best you can do with inside space. So getting outside. So all to say, this weekend had a great float with some new friends, dads in the community. I got to do some parenting, but also be with other guys who are really kind of in that mode and thinking about that. I got to be outside, and I was exercising on the stand-up paddleboard. And I have to say, at some points, it didn't feel amazing or great. It was arduous. There was wind. It was hard. It's sort of if you've ever been on a river, there's a lot of emotions with it. But it felt like one of those moments where, the balance for me was I was kind of getting a lot of things for myself at once. And I was about to say accomplished. I don't really want to say accomplished. I'm not sure the way we always want to think about this is checking off boxes, accomplishing things, stacking stuff so we get optimized. I don't find that super helpful for me. I don't know about you. I think that attitude is actually kind of worn pretty thin for me. I find that takes me out of being present a lot, and I really encourage you to think about part of this balance is I often find myself saying to myself and my patients, really about sort of settling into present experience. What physical health and mental health, just spend 5 minutes stretching right now after this. Finish this episode. Spend 3 minutes stretching and take it some, good deep nasal inhalations, filling up your lungs, trying to fill your heart with a sense of gratitude. You're stretching, you're doing some mental health. I think those are both great for you. This work-life balance and work-life responsibilities, I think that the thing I see missing the most for these days for a lot of people is the transition, the way that both work has become a little 24/7, right? We're checking email before we go to bed and waiting for texts. And if you're in that kind of job, and so there used to be this much more clear both separation that we talk a lot about, but also this transition period. It's where not having a commute or a walk or a time to process or time to kind of strategize and kind of get your plan on for moving into that personal, familial. In Healing the Modern Brain, I talk about connection a lot, and it's a whole chapter about the importance and the different types of connections. You work on connection to some institutions, or you volunteering, you connecting with friends, with family, right? But with your partner, really trying to get a little organized. And so that's one of those places I think that kind of why it feels so much busier to us is there aren't these transitions where you're allowed to have more focus. And I find that kind of interruption where there's 8 or 9 things going at once it allows it to feel so busy because we don't ever get one thing done. That's where I really I love the structure of psychiatry, because you come to sit with me, we get 45 minutes. And we can often said, hey, what's the most important thing to get done? Or when I meet with people about other projects, we sit for 45 minutes. And so I think part of why things again are seem busier is we don't give them the attention and the focus and the real singular mindfulness that they deserve. And I hope that's hopeful and doesn't sound scolding. I also want you to it's very in your reach. I mean, that's I think the part around these aspects for mental health and mental fitness that, especially when we're off, they feel so elusive, right? We can't get the balance right. We get overwhelmed. So I also try to just be really gentle Part of having a modern life that's like awesome, and part of having this phone, yeah, it's like horrible for our mental health. But part of what it's also like, I got to quickly ask like thousands of people for questions, some of these questions, and so I try to both kind of honor the wonder of the time that we're living in, and all of the busyness, all the places we get to go, all of the ideas and things we get to see, and then also needing to really separate from that in some ways and settle down. Next question, one about the future. Absolutely love this. How do you feel about the rise of personalized nutrition? Is it the future of mental health care? Personalized nutrition, meaning thinking of the foods that you like to eat, the foods that are most nutrient dense, foods that fit into your busy lifestyle or into your budget. That's an absolutely essential part of mental health and mental fitness. And it's been one that's been really neglected for years. However, this concept also, I think, is being misused or misappropriated in a lot of ways, trying to match up, for example, individual specific peculiarities about you and your genetics and your metabolism with the foods that you eat. And I think this is too much of a kind of fantasy that genetic code really determines specifics like whether you should, I don't know, eat lentils or not. Certainly, there are some interesting things in our genetic code that relate to how we digest foods or how different nutrients work on us. We have some interesting genetic variabilities. There's been a big promise in health and mental health that we're really going to revolutionize health in a way that on a practical level we haven't, and I think there's a really good reason for that. And it's where, again, personalized nutrition, in my mind, is you speaking to someone really qualified like our health coach and chef, Emily Berner. She's an inspiration when it comes to food and helping you as an individual understand food. She's helped me actually so much with my own kind of concepts around food and taste and flavors and things like knife skills. So personalized nutrition, meaning that you have tastes and likes, you have a culture of food that you come from, you have a palate that is unique. I love this idea. And I think actually what's missing so often in when we think about nutrition advice is there's no specificity. People just like, oh, you should eat this way, you should eat that way. And it's not personalized. I really loved the conversation with Austin Perlmutter. He was so sort of detailed and clear in how he understood advice, and really kind of made this very clear point of individual nutrition advice. It's something that shouldn't take as blanket statements. Whether a ketogenic diet or a Mediterranean diet is good for you is a personal question, and how you go about that is something you should really do with qualified professionals often. All right. Do I think personalized nutrition in terms of like genetic testing is the future of mental health care? No. Why? One, I think there's a lot of amazing mental health care going on. I think the future of mental health care is more active, more preventative, more mental fitness oriented work. I think that we're going to get a lot more out of some of the technologies like transcranial magnetic stimulation. I think we're going to understand some things about genetics and how that helps us better select things like medication. I think we're going to see an increased need for old school, real good psychodynamic psychotherapy as people are really struggling with the disillusionment of the modern world and the challenges that the modern world creates for us in terms of making more and deeper human connections in our life. That's what I think the future of mental health care looks like. And so personalized nutrition, that food matters to you and it matters to your mental health and to your mental fitness. Yeah, for sure. I think that is a very important piece of mental health and the future of mental health. All right. Next question is, so we've got some fun ones coming up from you all. Actually, let me just pull those up. I really appreciate you all asking me these questions and sharing some of your curiosity. All right. So this one comes from someone on Instagram. What single food or ingredient should everyone add to their diet today? It's a great question, very utilitarian question. I appreciate that. So when we think about adding to the diet today, let's kind of get a little more specific. Let's just talk about the modern American diet and where people are eating a lot of maybe trying to make some healthy choices, but struggling with processed food. And as we've heard from some of our questions already, being like kind of too busy. And so I think probably the one thing that I want people maybe to start with or add into their diet as specific food is I'd like you to add a new favorite plant. And why? Well, because in speaking with people over, how many we've getting close to 35, 40 episodes now, there's been this consistent theme from all the gastroenterologists, and gotten to speak with really some of the top ones in the country around diversity of fibers. And then this advice is I've seen this in my own diet, where I kind of can struggle. It's real easy to kind of, I don't know, bread, cheese, meat, yogurt, quick things to grab, snacks, Kind bars. I'm looking around. I got some Fig Newtons right here. So, when I kind of take a step back and I think, okay, what's a simple change I hope you all can make is I hope you eat a fresh piece of fruit today. I hope that you have some sauteed vegetables tonight. I hope you add in another plant that you like. I think that is a real fundamental, basic, maybe it's not specific enough. A person who asks this wants to be like, you should eat seaweed, every day. And I think one of the lessons for me in nutritional psychiatry and kind of helping create the framework of nutritional psychiatry over the last couple of decades is thinking in food categories. You've heard my rhyme, right? Seafood, greens, nuts and beans, and a little dark chocolate. That comes from, except for the dark chocolate joke, which is great for you, but those categories, right? Because whether you eat kale or bok choy or basil or microgreens or arugula or romaine, great. Right? It doesn't matter to me that it's not kale. It really doesn't. What matters is that you're eating a diversity of leafy greens. And so, focusing on not specific foods, but food categories. If you are going to go specific foods, you want a little inspo? I appreciate that. We all want a little inspo. So I'd try some pears, try some lentils, because we've talked a lot about them this episode. I'd want everybody to work on their tinned fish game. If there's like a specific food, tinned fish, right? I really like, and then the other kind of, I'd say, bucket or place where I can't come up with one really specific is people exploring and thinking about adding small amounts of fermented foods to their diet, especially people who haven't eaten any fermented foods. Try kombucha today, have a little kefir, a little yogurt. This is just, again, one of those pieces of data that or kind of moves the data supports. All right. Great question there from the Instagram here. Let me take another one from those questions. This one, maybe some of you wanted to hear the answer to. I hope that this is from an individual who says, my 25-year-old son is a different person before and after my cancer diagnosis 9 years ago. He's still struggling. How can I help him? Thank you for that question. Anytime families struggling with a severe illness like cancer, it is, sort of changes the weather system of that family in a way, ups the stakes of things, brings out a lot of really powerful feelings and a lot of fears and vulnerability. It brings some challenges that we all face about our existence, about our health, about our connections, about dependency and dependability of other people. It brings all of that into question. So I really appreciate this. So this is a question from a mom about her son. And when I think about a 25-year-old man who's been struggling with his mental health for 15 years since his mom has had a cancer diagnosis, there's a lot of questions that come up right away. One, this mom is thinking that the mental health struggle is related to her diagnosis, and it may be. It probably depends a little on the severity of that diagnosis in terms of there are a lot of cancers that are quite curable these days, and people do really well on. It seems, this has been going on for 10 years with this individual, so we really hope, I certainly hope that that's true of this individual, that the cancer is in remission. 15 is when a lot of young men start to struggle with their mental health, whether it's depression or anxiety or other forms of mental health concerns. Attentional problems come more into focus. Soft and subtle kind of psychotic or bipolar symptoms kind of come more into focus. And so if someone's struggling in their mental health over a decade, the first thing I want to understand is a bit of a treatment history and symptom history. Now, we shouldn't assume that the last decade has always been the same. Maybe this young individual started struggling with depression more after an initial diagnosis and then got better. And what they're really struggling with now is a different set of symptoms that they don't in any way maybe relate to mom's diagnosis. To get specific, let's say that though this is about the diagnosis of how do we handle that? Well, as a psychiatrist, I like to kind of strategize and then and try to tackle things pretty straight on and with clear language. I find that's what generally works best for people, especially around something like this, where a mother and a son are needing to connect over really two medical diagnoses, potentially like a major depression or some sort of depressive disorder, or however this individual is really kind of struggling, as mom says, and then having a chronic potentially illness like a cancer, and how do those two illnesses like affect this family dynamic? We also don't know a lot about the dynamic prior in terms of some sons really we're going to lean on our moms, we're going to call them up, we're going to want help. Other sons we really want to separate and take this stuff on our own. So kind of knowing your kid and their kind of style and understanding how you can be supportive. I'm a psychiatrist, right? So I always want to be supportive about the feelings and emotional health, and I really hope my kids are going to like tell me everything. But that, that's not how it works. I'm their dad. I'm here to hear about certain stuff and other things. Those are for other conversations. And so, understanding the ways specifically that you can be of help to your kid when there's something mental health going on. I think it's one of those really hard, challenging things of parenting. There's just a couple of things in that. I think one of the things that we tend to do that we want to be really cautious of is kind of as parents, we often are going to want to take the kind of responsibility or blame. And I think it's always really important we look at our behaviors, but I also think it's important for us to acknowledge that people have mental health stuff to go through, and being supportive, being tuned in, being aware is doing a really good job. So as I said, speaking clearly and strategizing. So if things have been going on chronically, often somebody's struggling with their mental health for 10 years, it's hard. Like, why now? Why today? Why this Sunday? And, oftentimes we wait for like an event or, a DUI, and that's the time to intervene. And I always just think it's great to do it now and do it with simple language. It, again, taking that treatment history or thinking about what's been tried. I find a lot of people just haven't tried much. They've gone to one therapy session, they've tried, Prozac 20 for 5 days, it felt icky, and they say meds and therapy doesn't work for them. Or they say, they tried a little exercise and, it doesn't work for them. And so really helping people stick to treatments and get complete trials, whether that's therapy, which I'm going to say like therapy really, the average therapy in America is I think like 7 or 8 sessions. But trying to find a good fit, get into some place, get a set of sessions, for weeks in a row consistently, really important missing piece for a lot of people. Giving medications adequate trial, super frustrating. We all agree meds can take 4 to 6 weeks to work, especially antidepressants. Some of them work right away. Medicines like benzodiazepines, propranolol, the stimulants, those all work that day. Ketamine can work very quickly for depression. So getting a sense of what's been tried. Now, this is probably a lot of way too much information for mom, and I appreciate your question because I think this is also a mistake we all make as parents. We get into like Mr. Fix-It mode or Miss Fix-It mode, right? Where we're coming up with all the solutions and possibilities. And I think parents are in a tough spot where we want to kind of present those and what we can be helpful with and what's available and be educated. And at the same time, it often overwhelms kids, right? That parents are kind of pushing treatment, doctors, medications, therapy, whatever. And at the same time, as parents, we have to be responsible that this isn't the kind of situation like you can't lead you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's like, I don't really think about that this way. Like there's lots of reasons that people, I don't know, drink the water is treatment, but like that people don't get help. And so I really appreciate this question. As you can hear, it's kind of got a lot of maybe tangents, but I hope useful information for you in terms of thinking through what's been tried, thinking through the feeling and the core symptoms of what's going wrong. Is this depression? Is it social anxiety? Thinking about the pieces that matter for all young men. When I was a younger psychiatrist, I treated a lot of young men and young women who came to New York, and I'd talk about the Manhattan trifecta. which means that if you're going to make it here, you need to have a place to live. You need to have a job, ideally a job that you enjoy, and you need to have a partner. It's a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a best friend, but you need to have somebody that you're co-conspirator, so to speak. And so, is your son missing one of those things? And again, lots of guys are. Why? Are there some people to inspire him? Folks that a lot of guys resonate with who are kind of maybe cooler than me, like Scott Galloway, for example, or there are a lot of male mental health influencers now who are speaking to a lot of my patients via their social feeds. And but I really appreciate the question. I think also I want you to hear what I always try and communicate, which is hopefulness, and that being active is often better than being passive. Speaking clearly and simply is better than making this too complex or filling it with all kinds of diagnostic jargon, and realizing that you're onto something. I really appreciate your message. It means there's something in there for you. And I hope you send me an update, and I wish you all the best. Thanks so much for your question. All right, let's see if we've got another good one from the questions on Instagram. This is a great question. I don't know a lot about this, but I want to answer because it was asked. Can you expand on histamine intolerance and its validity? Not an area of expertise for me, other than on the way a little bit that food relates to histamine. And so histamine and the one I know the most is mast cell activation disorder. I don't know very well, but a little bit. I've had a couple of patients who've struggled with that. We're eating things like aged food or fermented foods, which you can imagine I've recommended, cause mast cells. Mast cells are these immune cells, and they're kind of like these big packets of histamine, and they just hold histamine. And so, like when you have like seasonal allergies, that's like histamine. Mast cells are just dumping out histamine. And so, for some people with this very rare disorder, when they have aged foods or fermented foods, it triggers the dumping of the histamine. And the individual that I worked with had actually ended up in the emergency room several times, had got flushed, had this rapid heart rate, panic attacks, blood pressure went up. And it was found for her to be, she had this rare disorder. How valid is it? Like a lot of rare disorders where there's like an intersection of the immunological system, there's mental health and psychiatric involvement. There's a lot of kind of newer testing and specialized centers. I don't think I'm the right person to answer that question. It's kind of about validity of whether it exists or not. But my sense is it is in the scientific literature, and there are people who certainly struggle. Just like seasonal allergies, some people struggle more with this, and some people don't struggle at all. My sense is it's a very rare disorder. Great last question here. What's the most common misconception people have about food and mental health? I think the most common misconception that people have in food and mental health is that it's everything or that it's nothing. I think that there is a polarization in a way that people have approached food and mental health that has largely done a disservice to our mental health. I've really tried hard to avoid this in my career. I hope that I have. And I've tried to do this by encouraging the consumption of whole, real foods in a simple way, and to discourage extreme dogmatic diets that push people into extreme attitudes at food. I don't believe moderation in everything. I think that's a bad principle. There's lots of stuff I don't think that you should eat. And I think there's lots of stuff in our food environment which is frankly dangerous for our mental health. However, what I feel recurrently I see the most, the misconception I see the most is that it's everything. Right? It's all about this one food I got to cut out, or it's all about the oxalates in kale, which by the way, kale's a low oxalate green, or it's all about this one piece, often of misinformation. Right? There was a study that came out recently. I posted it. 98%, all of it, of medical information on social media was false. None of it was evidence-based. 2%. Boy, I really try hard to be in that 2%, and I think that's tough because you're competing against folks who feel it's everything. And then I think there's the camp that thinks it's nothing. The food doesn't have any impact on mental health. And we'll see this from lots of folks, a kind of dismissiveness. That certainly isn't true. There's a lot more data around that than when I started my career. Certainly when I was talking about the importance of food and mental health 20 years ago, there really weren't any trials, one or two. no clinical trials. But now today, there's a fair amount of data that what we eat really does impact our risk of depression, risk of anxiety. Certainly, there are now randomized trials showing in specific settings, augmenting, making sure that people who are struggling with mental health disorders are getting proper nutrition, eating more nutrient-dense foods, whole foods, eating more like a Mediterranean diet. There are, 6 of those trials that have now been positive. And so again, this misconception is like it's everything, right? Anytime you're feeling anxious, it's what you ate. Anytime you're feeling down, it's because like, you had that depressive food, or that it's nothing. I think that really is damaging. I hope being here and sitting through this AMA, you feel it's something. And I hope you feel that this information is helpful and empowering to you and fills you with hope that there are things that we can do, that if you're getting your food right, that's one of them. And if you're struggling with that, I hope that some of these resources help you feel more confidence that the foods you're choosing are supporting your brain health and your mental health, that amongst all the controversy and the alls and the nothings, there is something. There's something real, there's something helpful, there's something delicious, there's something affordable for you. So that's the misconception that I feel people have the most. Last question, and I appreciate this one as someone who comes from a really rural, poor part of America. Can someone improve their mental health through diet if they are on a limited budget? And I just want to grab this. This is not my next book. This is my most recent book. This is book number 4, Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety. And I want to pull it off the shelf because these recipes and all the recipes in my books, I often wrote these and tested them and worked with recipes developers when I was living in rural America. And I had this rule that I wanted the ingredients for the foods that we recommended that you could get them at any big box store. Walmart, Costco, one of the big Albertsons. That these weren't weird exclusive specialty items. These were everyday foods that anyone could have access to. And that was very important to me. I grew up in a food desert, which is a place where you don't have access to healthy food. And I also grew up in a place where lots of people grew their own food. And there's amazing abundance of food. And it's always kind of, I guess I've carried that contrast with me. And so there are all kinds of top foods on the antidepressant food scale, top foods in nutritional psychiatry that are exceptionally affordable. A bunch of kale, which you can either grow yourself, buy at a farmer's market, or just buy for a couple dollars a bunch, pretty much in any grocery store. Things like tinned or canned fish, salmon, or anchovy, sardines. Again, maybe not something that your palate appreciates right now, or you don't like, or maybe never will, but certainly something I didn't used to eat much of. I eat all the time. Now I'm trying really to make these small fish one of my main sources of protein. Dried beans, dried lentils, like incredible value. Frozen fruits and vegetables. A lot of times, one of the reasons food's expensive is waste a lot of it. And then being selective with things like organic labels or things that are, kind of marketed or out of season. I'd always rather have you buy a big frozen bag of wild blueberries than spend way too much money out of season on a fresh organic blueberry. Why? I think those wild blueberries are actually healthier. I'm not worried about the sort of safety or worried about them not being organic, at least in that instance. And I think they're going to last longer and provide you more benefits, more anthocyanins over the coming months than a little carton of organic blueberries that's going to rot. So lots of ways to save money. We have a great free download on my website, Brain Food on a Budget, because we get this question so much. The food costs are just a little outdated. We made it a few years ago. There's been some food inflation, but we just wanted to list, hey, these are the basics of the pantry. Hey, this is kind of how much week to week, if you're eating this stuff, the olive oil, the leafy greens, the seafood, is kind of what a budget looks like. And so I hope that resource is helpful to you. Again, it's on my website, drewramseymd.com. It's Brain Food on a Budget. It's under our free downloads. Well, everybody, thank you so much for all these questions. It's a real honor and a privilege just to get to sit with you and answer some of them and to think about food and mental health and mental fitness. I hope you'll check out some of the resources that we've put together, whether Eat to Beat Depression and Anxiety or our new book, an e-course, Healing the Modern Brain. all about mental fitness and how you build mental fitness and revitalize your mind. Thank you so much for your time and attention. And I hope you take this information and eat a lot of lentils and also find some new foods that you like and also feel inspired about your ability to take care of your health and your mental health. And then lastly, please subscribe on YouTube or on whatever channel that you're listening or finding this podcast. And I really appreciate if you'd share it with anyone who you care about who would benefit from hearing this information. I'm Dr. Drew Ramsey. I'll see you soon. Thanks so much. Take care.